Welcome once again to the Learn Pro channel. We say get the skills you need. Today we want to address Active Directory domain services and a very important topics which we as a network engineer, system engineer, precisely system engineer needs to work along with that. We will address target areas where especially West Africa. So I hope you flow with this. Now, learning objective of the day, explain Active Directory concept, the domain, the organization unit, the forest, and the domains controllers. Will address that carefully and plan infrastructure, addressing your naming convention, which is very vital, and always make sure the consultant or highest authority give you the structure naming scheme, and you have to have it in place, and that is implemented by using your DNS and your IP address, time synchronizations, and security baseline. We also will address install and configure Active Directory, and this is the major focus point. We will address that, and this is where we will start to implement it, and every sys engineer must be able to build a complete domain controller and ensuring that the DNS services is resolved, is running, and your name are resolved. We will also look at execute deployment. Promote the very first DC ever, meaning your first domain controllers, and that will become the root forest if it's the first. And you should also be able to join your clients, validate your core services to be functional. As well, we'll look at scenario within our region, West Africa, for SME, for telco, and public sectors environment. Let's address understanding Active Directory fundamental. What is Active Directory domain services? Basically, it's a centralized database that stores every information about your network objects, looking at the users, the computers, and the group. So we will address as well, look at authentication and authorizations, which Active Directory plays a very important role by the help of the Kerberos version 5, validating user credentials and control access to resources. Policies management enforces security policies across the entire network. Yes, we'll have time and we'll try to get some time to also do a video on that, because whatever you're doing, the Active Directory is your command center, and to be able to manage hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands people, you have to have best understanding of Active Directory, because management will give you policies, and you as the sys engineer or sysadmin, you have to infuse those things into the system. Key concept. We will look at the forest, which is the topmost level domain logical grouping of your objects, organizations, which we can say a container or hollow stuff that we can represent as, let's use the word departments. So we can have example that the HR department, the IT department, and sales department, so on and so forth. Domain controllers, this is the server that will host the Active Directory domain services. So whoever running whatever services that run the Active Directory domain services, that server become a host, and that server is called your DC in short. We also have the global catalogs. We host a repository of the Active Directory resources based on the text, which is equally the same. It holds a partial attribute set of all objects. Very, very important. Benefit of Active Directory organizations. Yes, centralized management, a single point of control for all network resources. As I said, a command center tools, and you want to have full control of your infrastructure. Active Directory is very, very vital. Enhance security, role-based access control authentications, which is very, very important based on your job roles or your responsibility. You can define that. And for scalability to growth from smaller to enterprise environment, Very, very important. Compliance. We must always meet regulatory requirement for data security. So whatever it is, we must infuse these four key things into our infrastructure to ensure that we are having full control over the system. We will also look at West Africa, for example, Ministry of Finance deployment. We'll look at the structure, a single forest, where you have for that infrastructure or for that ministry, we can have a root forest, and on that root forest, we can have char or we can have root trees. As well, we can have the OU representing the departments to segment your resources or to segment your various areas. Security based on role-based access control is via group of different access levels. Replications, yes, the design most of the time, a hub and spoke environment where you have the head office, could be in Accra, and then you have branches in Kumasi, Takrali, Tamale, and so on and so forth. As well, depends on your structure, please follow suit. Next, we need to look at the prerequisite or the pre-deployment planning and requirement. You can't just wake up to start to install any applications. Please always do this. What is the hardware requirement or the software requirement? All these things are very, very important. So in this context for your domains, you need 2+ virtual core servers. RAM, you need between 8 minimum to 16 GB RAM. You should have a RAID 1 where your operating system will install, preferably to avoid downtime. Right now, it is recommended that we use solid state, and you can use Windows 2016, 2019, 2022, 2025, all of them. The steps is just synonymous. Network static IP DNS to domain. Please note, every server's dedicated server must have a static IP address. As well, your router's interfaces must have static IP address. So very important. You can also do VLANs to segment your departmental areas and then define your policies based on those departments. That for network engineers, and then your time synchronization should be efficient and effective, ensuring that the time across every server's application, domain controllers, and the client, once again, plus minus 5 interval. So security, we need to have firewalls, very, very important, and define the rules that will harden or constrain or filter whatever traffic coming into your system to avoid any form of illegal access onto your system resources. We'll also look at the AD, DNS ports. So you need to know precisely which port to open, and I will say stress on security ports. So note you have to open them and backup strategies. Make sure that you always back up your Active Directory, especially the system state data, which entails all resources in there. Power, oh, very, very crucial, because your Active Directory is the key server here and must always be on, must always be up and running before everybody can have their lock-ins. So you have to have reliable power resources there. Planning consideration, domain naming. Register your domain name, preferably. That is the best, especially when you want to have remote access, internet access representations. But if an SME doesn't have the means and it's just starting and they want it to be local for now, you can define your local name scheme. Organizational structure, design that. your OU, your group policies objects. Yes, every department must have unique policies, and that is very important. Time synchronizations for Kerberos authentications, once again, plus manufacturer. Backup, do a routine backup, daily backups, and have a disaster recovery plan. You can also have backup into your DRL site if you have to do so. We also need to look at the design. We are using a simple design just to be able to have our demo to be done. We will need a server that will act as a domain controller, a switch, and two clients to help us in that line. So, for example, for a Lagos environment, in case you have your head office in the Lagos and you have your branches in various states or even within Lagos itself, then you can do that. So you can have Lagos, you can have Abuja, you can have Port Harcourt, you can have maybe the Delta State. Depends on your infrastructure. In this context, we are looking at hub and spoke, meaning everyone queuing or having to sync to the HQ. Security, you need to look at the role base for limited physical access, especially where in the instances where security is high and we don't want to put a domain in the environment where we cannot send a trained IT administrator, and we also don't want the resources to be amended by anyone. So read-only domain controllers will be preferred, and it helps to also reduce bandwidth. But in the case where the branch is a little bit bigger and we want to have the best, and we have some sensitive domain aware applications in there, then we can also have, and equally they have good bandwidth, then we can have char domain in those environments. Replication, very, very important. Yes, you must schedule replications to all your servers, to all your domain within various branches, and that is very, very important. Let's look at the Active Directory domain deployment process. Once you have to prepare your servers and rename your server, set the static IP, DNS, install, update, configure, time, synchronization, verify prerequisite. Make sure prior to your process, prerequisites are well met without any error. Sometimes it will give you warning, but make sure that when you read those warnings, you can resolve them later on. But when error exists, you can't do anything. You cannot progress until you resolve that. Install your roles. Obviously, you have to install your Active Directory domain services along with the DNS, because Active Directory depends a lot on DNS servers. So if even you don't choose the DNS, it will definitely install it. You can also use PowerShell to do that, where you have the install window features. Next thing, we have to promote the domain. Once you install the roles, that does not mean you have added directory. Promotion is what comes, and that's what is very, very important. If that would be your very first domain ever in your infrastructure, that would be your root forest. And then you can have other things into the structure. You can have a root tree, you can have a chart, and so on and so forth. Now, prior to your step of promotions, you meet where you have to set the password for the directory service restore mode. This is very crucial because when the Active Directory has some problem, you have to go to the restore mode to be able to rectify the problem and reboot back to normality. But if you don't know the password, please, for current servers, we can go through some steps to be able to have that back, the password. But why go through that constraint? Just remember the password you put at the restore mode. Configure your AD, meaning you have to set up your DNS, your reverse local zone, such that you can use your NS lookup to resolve name to IP and IP to name, verify your replication, check for your flexible single master operations roles. We have 5 major roles. We have the infrastructure masters, we have the PDC emulator, the domain naming master, RAM master, and so on and so forth. But make sure that's why we say come to Learn Pro. At Learn Pro, we say get the skills you need. You will have deeper understanding of this. Normally, most of the time, I prefer to use command line precisely for transferring of the role or seizing of the role. Maybe we may have time to have a separate domain, but I prefer you join Learn Pro and you have a deeper understanding on that. Build your structure, create a baseline or use group, and then deploy a starter OU. Mainly, most of the time we do a starter GPOs, and then that starter GPOs represent a de facto standards policies that we will use to associate with each GPOs. Having done those various GPOs maybe for HR GPOs, for IT GPO, for sales marketing GPOs, then we create specific policies for each one of them. But in a case where you had to have a standard policies cutting across for everyone, we recommend having a starter GPOs and put all your logic in there. Mainly, for example, password policies or hardening logic you had to put in there. Next, you need to have to join your domains. Once your DNS is well structured and rectified, then you must join the domain. All clients will join the domains, and you need to verify whether they can log on. You need to check if you have policies being applied, whether it's working or not. Last but not least, you need to address your post-deployment, implement backup, continue monitoring, and then the role-based access control, dedications, and foundry password policies in the context where, especially for ITs, you had to do, and for higher management, they need to have very complex passwords that it will not be easy for hackers or intruders to be able to manipulate, like having like dictionary attacks to be able to brute force attack, all these kinds of attack to guess your password. Please, fine green will be appropriate. Next thing, we need to also address cases that within our environment for where West Africa deploy a single forest, whatever name you have at the HQ, depends on your naming scheme. Extend to regional branches using SADAWare applications. SADAWare applications like Exchange and other applications that demand that, and you need to put in your role DCs. Summary key takeaway and assessment. Plan your naming and DNS should be early. Secure your DCs from day one. Document, test your environment regularly. Use register DNS name. Implement least privileges. Very, very important. Very, very important. Exactly what policies or permissions you had to put in place to ensure that the users have its exact counts of permissions or right on XYZ resources is very important. You ensure that you follow least privilege guidelines or prerequisite. Let's look at best practice for West Africa. Use DC for branches, especially where bandwidth are so expensive and the branch is so small, you cannot afford too much of speed, then fine. You can go for the DC's time. Need to be synced across all domain. Ensures that you have auditing is done, have your systems to backup, site-aware applications, and then role-based asset dedications. Implementations tips that are smaller for a single domain, then you can expand to forest as your need arises. You can expand the forest as the needs arises. Test thoroughly, validate all services before production deployment. That's why it's very important to have a test environment. And once that is okay, then you can push it across and document everything you can, because in case of any issues, you can always rest on that so that you can easily troubleshoot. There are some few questions which you can have time to go through it and then work it out from there. That is it for our theoretical aspect of the added directory. Our part 2 videos will be for the hands-on. Hope to see you again. Have a nice day. Bye for now.